Hello, and thanks for joining Section 5, Optimizing the User Interface for Other Devices. In this section, we will actually learn what is auto layout and how we can make use of it. We will cover building an adaptive user interface that adapts to different screen sizes. We will make use of size classes that allow us to change the user interface depending on the current screen size. We will also learn how we can use auto layout to create a dynamic cell height in our table view. We will optimize the user interface for our iPad. And then there's something really magic happening. We are going to check the checkmark macOS and we will run our app as a native macOS app. And the last two topics are we will switch to the dark mode and see how our app looks like with dark colors. And we will also see how we can support accessibility by supporting the dynamic type that allows users to increase font sizes on their device. Let's start with building an adaptive UI with auto layout. In this first video, we're going to take a look at the different device sizes we have in Xcode. Then we will see how we can make use of constraints in Interface Builder and make our UI adaptive. And last but not least, we will use size classes to change the UI depending on the available screen size we have. Alright, let's start with having a look at our recipes list view controller first. It is contained in the main storyboard, so please select main storyboard and make sure that you're seeing the recipes list view controller. For now, we've designed the user interface always for the iPhone 11. Let's click on it and we can see that Xcode gives us a lot more options for different device sizes. It starts with the iPad Pro 12.9 inch, which is the biggest screen we have, and it goes down to the iPhone 4S. So what happens if we click on the iPhone 4S? We can see that the whole storyboard changes to the screen size of an iPhone 4S. What we can also notice is that our table view is now cut off. So now it's time to use auto layout that this does not happen and the UI adapts to the screen size. So switch back to the iPhone 11 as this gives us a little bit of a bigger screen and it's easier to add constraints to that one. We can also switch to a different orientation like landscape down here. Notice that the table view does not take up the whole space we would actually have available here. So let's see how we can add constraints to use all of that space and make it look more beautiful. Again, go back to the portrait orientation. And first we bring up the inspector on the right-hand side. It has a ruler here, which is the size inspector. So let's open that as we need it later. So first of all, we start with our segmented control. And we will align it to the left-hand side, to the right-hand side, to the top, and to the bottom. You can add constraints down here and you get a new constraints window where you can select the padding or margin that you want to achieve and you can activate or deactivate the constraint. So what we actually want to have, we want to have a margin of 8 to the top, a margin of 20 to the left, same goes for right, and of 8 to the bottom. You can uncheck the constraint to margin. This would just make Xcode decide the padding we want to add. We actually know it for ourselves. So let's add the 4 constraints. Notice the blue icons and also the red one. The red one indicates an error. Let's see what we an error have. It tells us that the table view is missing constraints, especially for the X position and the width, and also for the height. So that means Xcode or the interface builder does not know how to lay out these elements. That's because we haven't added constraints to the table view yet. So let's do that. We already have the constraint to the segmented control, which is 8. We want to have 0 to the left and 0 to the right. And we also want to have 0 to the bottom. So let's add these 3 constraints. And now you can see that all errors are resolved and our screen of the recipes list is perfectly laid out with auto layout. So let's change the device again and switch back to something smaller like an iPhone 8. And you can see that nothing is cut off anymore. So switch back again to the iPhone 11, as we have to do some more things on this screen. You notice that the table view actually goes below our tab bar. So this would mean that if we have a long list, information would get covered by our tab bar. So what we have to do here is we have to click on the bottom constraint, and instead of aligning it to the super view, we will actually have to align it to the safe area. And now we get a little blue line here that indicates the table view actually went up. But what's actually wrong now is that we have a constant of -83. We just actually want to have a constant of 0 because we want to align it right above the tab bar. So let's add 0 and hit enter. And now we can see that the table view is aligned as expected. Let's move on with the recipe detail storyboard. We first start with aligning our banner image view. So let's open the Add New Constraints window. We want to have 0 to the top, 0 left, 0 right, and we want to have a space of 8 to the headline label. Let's add these constraints. And in this particular case, we actually have to assign a dedicated height to our banner view, as we want to always have the same height. So let's add 240 instead of 160 to make it a little bit bigger. And don't worry that our labels are not covered. So first, we want to have that the banner view goes up to the very top. We don't really care about whether it's underneath the status bar, as this would actually give us a nice banner view. So instead of safe area here, we will have to select super view. And again, Xcode adds a constant of 44, but we actually want to have 0. So let's change to 0, and we will see that our banner view goes up to the very top. Now next we have to align the text view and the label. So just move them a little bit below and start with aligning the label. You can also add constraints by holding the Control key and just dragging it to the left side. Notice that there is no left or right space. It's actually called leading and trailing. It's called that way because in some languages you are reading from right to the left, and therefore it would be really confusing to name that left and right. So leading is actually the left hand in that case, and trailing the right hand. So let's add the leading first, and we can also mix it up. We will add the left or the right hand side constraint via that window. And last but not least, we have to align the text view. Top 8 is fine, 20, 20, and also at the bottom we want to have a spacing of 8. So notice that our text view would actually be covered by the home indicator button. So let's select the bottom constraint. You can do it by clicking on the blue icon down here. And we actually have to make sure that the first item is the safe area. Otherwise the home indicator would cover our text. Again, Xcode changed the constant to -26. We actually want to have 0. Now that view is also perfectly laid out with auto layout. So there's only one more view left, and it is inside the Add Recipe storyboard. So let's move here. It's actually a rather easy one. So let's align the text view first. We can uncheck the constraint to margins. We just use the values Xcode already gives us here. And we want to align the text view that it uses the whole space we have. So now that's fine. Imagine that we open this screen on an iPad. As we have a much bigger height, we can actually make use of that. And size classes are a perfect way to change interface elements depending on the screen size. So let's select the text field and add a height constraint of 34. This height constraint is valid for all our screen sizes. But we actually want to have a bigger text field on the iPad. We can make use of size classes by adding a new constant here and customize that one. It asks us what kind of variation we want to have. In that case, we actually want to have regular and regular. So don't worry about the namings here, just add the variation. And now we have to select an iPad. It doesn't matter which one, just use the first one here. It's the iPad Pro 9.7 inch. And we can see that the size class is regular for width and regular for height for the iPad. This means the constant we've defined here is valid for an iPad or every other device that is using the same size class. So in that case, we want to change it to 64. Notice that the text field is now much bigger. If we switch back to the iPhone, we will get the smaller text field again. This is changing because of the size class. So now all our views are perfectly laid out with auto layout,